I sold my house to cure my husband's cancer. When he recovered, he left me for a younger woman. My son and my business partners laughed at me. I spent a cold night under a storm when I saw a scared little girl shivering from the cold. I used my last tenders to buy her food and a blanket. 3 days later, 17 black cars stopped in front of the shelter when a billionaire stepped out of the car and saw his daughter with me. He did something that changed everything. I am glad to have you here. My name is Helen, and at 64 years old, I learned that love can be the most expensive mistake you will ever make. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning in March. I was arranging fresh flowers in the antique shop I had built from nothing over 30 years when my phone rang. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Lopez, and the words he spoke changed everything. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "I need you and your husband to come in immediately. The test results are back." My hands trembled as I set down the white roses I had been holding. Thomas had been complaining about fatigue for months, but we had both attributed it to his age. He was 68 after all. Men his age were supposed to slow down. The diagnosis was pancreatic cancer. Stage 3. I watched my husband of 40 years crumble in that sterile office chair, his weathered hands covering his face as Dr. Lopez explained treatment options. The words blurred together. Chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments. But one phrase cut through everything else. "We are looking at approximately $300,000 for the full treatment protocol." That night, Thomas could not sleep. I found him in our kitchen at 3 years us in the morning, staring out the window at our small backyard garden. "I cannot put you through this," he whispered without turning around. "Maybe it is my time, Helen. Maybe I should just—" I wrapped my arms around him from behind, feeling how much weight he had already lost. "Do not you dare talk like that. We are going to fight this together. Our insurance would cover maybe 50% of the costs. The rest would have to come from somewhere else." I knew where. The antique shop was my life's work. I had started it in 1982 with $300 and a dream working 18-hour days to build it into something special. The old Victorian house I had converted sat on prime real estate downtown, filled with carefully curated pieces I had collected over decades. It was worth nearly $450,000. Our house was paid off worth another $250,000 in the current market. Between the two properties, we could cover Thomas's treatment and have enough left over to rent a small apartment while he recovered. I made the decision without telling him. The next morning, I called a realtor. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Carter Nancy?" my realtor asked when I explained what I wanted to do. "These are major assets. Once you sell, there is no going back." I looked at Thomas sleeping fitfully on our couch, his face gaunt and pale. I was sure the process took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of watching Thomas grow weaker while I quietly dismantled our life. I sold the shop to a developer who planned to tear it down for condos. The house went to a young couple with 3 children who promised to take care of my rose garden. I moved us into a small apartment across town and threw myself into being Thomas's caregiver. Every morning, I drove him to treatments. Every evening, I held his head while he was sick. I learned to cook foods that would not upset his stomach, to give injections to monitor his medication schedule with military precision. For 8 months, cancer became our entire world. But it worked. In November, Dr. Lopez used the word we had been praying for: remission. Thomas looked better than he had in a year. His color returned, his appetite came back, and he started talking about the future again. I thought we had won. I was so naive. The conversation that shattered my world happened on a Wednesday evening in December. I was making Thomas's favorite soup when he cleared his throat behind me. "Helen, we need to talk." Something in his tone made my stomach drop, but I kept stirring. "What about— I have been thinking a lot during this whole ordeal. about life, about what I want. I turned around, soup spoon still in my hand. Thomas was sitting at our small table, his hands folded, looking anywhere but at me. I want a divorce. The spoon clattered to the floor. What I know this is difficult, but I have realized that I want to spend whatever time I have left being truly happy. Haven't we been happy? My voice sounded strange, distant. I had thought after beating the cancer together. Thomas finally looked at me, and I saw something I had never seen before. Indifference. Helen, you are a good woman, but we have been living like roommates for years. I want passion. I want to feel alive again. Feel alive again, I repeated. I sold everything to save your life. I spent 8 months taking care of you. I gave up my business, my home, everything I built. I never asked you to do that. Those words hit me like a physical blow. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. You never asked me. You are my husband. Of course I did it. Well, now I am asking for my freedom. That was when I understood. This was not a sudden decision born from surviving cancer. This was planned. There is someone else is not there. Thomas's silence was answer enough. Who is she? Her name is Lily. She was one of my nurses during treatment. I felt like I was falling down a deep well. Lily. I remembered her. Pretty blonde, maybe 32 or 33. She had always been extra attentive to Thomas, always smiling and laughing at his jokes. I had thought she was just being professional. How long, I whispered. Does it matter? How long, Thomas? He sighed. Since July, right in the middle of his treatment, while I was selling my life's work to pay for his care, he was falling in love with another woman. I want you out by the end of the month, he said, standing up. I will give you 30 days to find somewhere else to live. This is my apartment too. I am the one who rented it. My name is on the lease. Lily will be moving in after the holidays. It would be awkward for all of us if you stayed. I stared at this man I had loved for 40 years. This man I had sacrificed everything to save, and I did not recognize him. Where am I supposed to go? I do not have any money. I spent everything on your treatment. That is not my problem anymore, Helen. The next week was a nightmare. I called our son Michael, thinking surely he would understand. Surely he would be outraged by his father's behavior. Mom, I think you need to accept that Dad has the right to be happy, he said when I explained what was happening. You two have not been in love for years. Everyone could see that. Michael, I gave up everything to save his life. And that was your choice, but you cannot hold that over his head forever. I am not holding anything over his head. I am just trying to understand how you can support this. Michael sighed, sounding irritated. Look, Mom, you have always been dramatic. Dad told me how you have been guilt-tripping him about the money. Lily makes him happy in a way you have not for years. He told you about Lily. Of course he did. He has been miserable. Mom, give him a break. I hung up feeling more alone than ever. My own son was taking his father's side, painting me as the villain in this story. But the worst was yet to come. I had hoped to keep my partnership in Carter and Associates, the consulting business I had built with 2 other women, before opening the antique shop. It was not much, but it would give me a small income while I figured out what to do next. Diane and Carol called me into the office 2 days after New Year's. Helen, we have been discussing your situation, Diane said, not meeting my eyes. Given everything you are going through personally, we think it might be best if you stepped back from the business. Stepped back, I repeated. I helped found this company. Carol leaned forward, her expression falsely sympathetic. We are concerned about your emotional state, the divorce, the financial stress. It is affecting your judgment. What are you talking about? I have been working here for 20 years. You missed 3 client meetings last month, Diane said. You seemed distracted, unfocused. I was dealing with my husband's cancer treatment and then a divorce. Of course I was distracted. Exactly our point, Carol said. We think you need time to get your personal life sorted out. We are prepared to buy out your partnership stake. They offered me $20,000 for a partnership worth at least $55,000. I knew they were taking advantage of my situation. But I also knew I did not have the energy or resources to fight them. By February 1st, I had lost my husband, my son's respect, my home, my business, and my life savings. I was 64 years old with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. The homeless shelter on Oakwood Avenue became my temporary address. The social worker who processed my intake form was kind, but overworked. It is just until you get back on your feet, she assured me, handing me a list of rules and meal times. Most people do not stay long. But as I lay in my narrow cot that first night, listening to the sounds of 30 other women trying to sleep in one room, I wondered if this was how my story would end. Alone, forgotten, discarded by the very people I had sacrificed everything for. The woman in the cot next to mine was snoring softly. Across the room, someone was crying quietly into their pillow. Outside, rain began to fall against the windows, and I pulled my thin blanket up to my chin. I closed my eyes and tried not to think about Thomas and Lily in the apartment I had paid for sleeping in the bed I had bought building a life on the ashes of mine. Tomorrow would mark exactly 2 months since my husband had asked for a divorce, 2 months since my world had collapsed. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I had no idea that everything was about to change in the most unexpected way possible. 3 weeks at the shelter had taught me things I never imagined I would need to know. How to make instant coffee taste almost decent by adding a pinch of salt. How to fold clothes so they would fit in a plastic bag. How to disappear into yourself when the woman 2 beds over started screaming about invisible enemies at 3 in the morning. Most importantly, I learned that dignity was something you had to fight for every single day. The morning of the storm started like any other. I woke at 5:30 before the breakfast bell and made my way to the communal bathroom. The mirror above the sink showed a woman I barely recognized. My hair, once my pride, now hung limp and gray around a face that had aged years in just months. The shelter provided basic toiletries, but there was only so much you could do with generic shampoo and a bar of institutional soap. I had been looking for work for 2 weeks, but at 64, most employers saw me as a liability rather than an asset. The few interviews I had managed to secure always ended the same way. "We will be in touch," they would say with polite smiles that did not reach their eyes. That morning, I had $734 left from the small amount I had managed to save from selling my jewelry. It was all that stood between me and absolute destitution. The weather forecast had been ominous all week. The meteorologists were calling it a significant weather event, the kind of storm that could knock out power for days and turn streets into rivers. By noon, the shelter staff were already making preparations, checking generators and stocking extra food. "All residents should plan to remain inside tonight," announced Mrs. Park, the day manager. "This storm is going to be dangerous." But at 4:30 that afternoon, I realized I had made a critical mistake. In my distraction over a job interview that morning, I had forgotten to take my blood pressure medication. Without it, I risked a stroke or heart attack. The pills were sitting in my small bag upstairs, but I needed food to take them safely, and dinner would not be served until 6:00. I counted my money again. $7.34 enough for a small sandwich and maybe a carton of milk from the corner store 3 blocks away. The wind was already picking up as I stepped outside, pushing against me with surprising force. Dark clouds churned overhead, and the first fat raindrops were beginning to fall. I pulled my thin jacket tighter and hurried down the street. The corner store was nearly empty, except for the elderly clerk and a man buying cigarettes. I grabbed a pre-made turkey sandwich and a small carton of milk, calculating the exact cost in my head. $4.67. That would leave me with $2.67 for tomorrow. As I paid, the clerk glanced outside nervously. "Storm is coming fast," he said. "You should get home quick." Home. I nodded and tucked my purchases into my jacket. The walk back to the shelter would take about 15 minutes if I hurried, but I never made it. Halfway there, the sky opened up. Not the gentle rain that had been threatening all day, but a torrential downpour that soaked through my jacket in seconds. The wind turned vicious, whipping debris down the street and making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. I ducked into a doorway to wait it out, but the storm only got worse. Lightning split the sky, followed immediately by thunder so loud it made my teeth ache. This was not a storm that would pass in a few minutes. This was the kind of weather that could kill you if you were not careful. That was when I heard it. A sound that cut through the howling wind and driving rain, crying. Not the wailing of the storm, but human crying. A child crying. I peered out into the rain, trying to locate the source. There, huddled behind a row of garbage cans in the alley beside a closed restaurant, was a small figure. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, soaked to the skin and shivering violently. I did not think. I ran. "Honey." I called out, my voice barely audible over the storm. "Honey, what are you doing out here?" The child looked up at me with enormous brown eyes filled with terror. She was small for her age, with tangled dark hair plastered to her head and clothes that had once been expensive but were now torn and muddy. "I am lost," she whispered, teeth chattering so hard she could barely speak. "I cannot find my daddy." "Oh, sweetheart." I knelt down beside her, not caring that the water from the alley immediately soaked through my pants. "How long have you been out here?" Since this morning. I think maybe yesterday." "I do not know." My heart broke. This tiny thing had been alone in the storm for hours, maybe longer. "What is your name?" "Emily," she managed between chatters. "Emily Rose." "Well, Emily Rose, I am Helen, and we need to get you somewhere safe right now." But as I looked around, I realized our options were limited. The restaurant behind us was closed, its metal security gate pulled down tight. The other buildings on this block were mostly offices, equally shuttered. The shelter was still 6 blocks away, and there was no way this little girl could make that walk in this weather. Then I remembered the 24-hour convenience store we had passed. It was not ideal, but it would be warm and dry. "Can you walk?" I asked Emily. She nodded, though I could see she was exhausted and probably in mild shock. I took off my jacket, wrapping it around her small shoulders, even though it left me in just a thin sweater. "Hold on to me," I told her. "Do not let go no matter what." The 3 blocks to the convenience store felt like 3 miles. The wind kept trying to knock us down, and the rain came in sheets so thick we could barely see. I kept one arm around Emily and used the other to guide us along storefronts and parked cars. By the time we stumbled through the store's doors, we were both soaked and shaking. The clerk, a different one from earlier, looked up from his magazine with concern. "Jesus, lady, you should not be out in this with a kid." "I know," I said, water dripping from my hair. "We got caught in it." The store was wonderfully warm with fluorescent lights that seemed impossibly bright after the dark storm outside. Emily stayed pressed against my side, her small hand gripping my sweater. I looked around the store, calculating. I had $2.67 left. Emily needed dry clothes, or at least something to help warm her up. She needed food. She probably needed medical attention, but that would have to wait until the storm passed. In the clothing section, I found the cheapest options: a child's t-shirt with a cartoon character for $3.99 and a small package of socks for $2.50. Both were too expensive for my budget, but I could not leave this child in wet clothes. That was when I made a decision that would change everything. I approached the clerk with the t-shirt, socks, a small bag of cookies, and a bottle of water. "How much for all of this?" He rang it up. $47. I had $2.67, but in my other pocket I had something else. The emergency $20 bill I had hidden away weeks ago. My last safety net. Money I had sworn to save for a true emergency. Looking at Emily blue-lipped and shivering, I knew this qualified. "Here," I said, pulling out the 20. The clerk handed me my change, $10.53. Combined with what I already had, it left me with $13.20 total, more than I had had all day. In the store's small bathroom, I helped Emily change into the dry shirt. Her clothes underneath were soaked, but at least the outer layer was warm now. I used paper towels to dry her hair as much as possible and helped her put on the clean socks. "Better?" I asked. She nodded, and for the first time since I had found her, she smiled slightly. "Thank you." We settled in a corner of the store with the cookies and water. Emily ate like she had not seen food in days, which made me wonder exactly how long she had been missing. "Emily, where do you live?" I asked gently. "In a big house," she said around a mouthful of cookie with lots of windows and a big yard. "Do you remember your address?" She shook her head. "Daddy says I am not supposed to tell strangers where I live. Smart girl and smart father. But it made finding her family more complicated." "What about your daddy's name?" "His full name." "Daniel," she said immediately. "Daniel Lawson." The name meant nothing to me, but I filed it away. "Does your daddy have a phone number you remember?" "Again?" She shook her head. "I am not supposed to remember numbers either. But I was at school, and then there were these men." Her voice trailed off, and I saw fear creep back into her eyes. "What men, honey?" "They said they knew my daddy. They said I had to come with them. But they were mean, and they scared me, so I ran away." My blood went cold. This was not just a lost child. This was something much more serious. "Emily, when did this happen? When did the men try to take you 3 days ago? Maybe 4? I have been hiding ever since, 3 or 4 days." This little girl had been surviving on the streets for nearly a week, hiding from what sounded like kidnappers. How had no one found her? How had there been no Amber Alerts, no police search? Unless there had been, and I just had not seen them. Living in the shelter, I did not have regular access to news or social media. Later, I would learn that Daniel had quietly ordered a full media blackout on the kidnapping to avoid tipping off the men who had taken her. The whole world might have been unaware, but the right people knew, and they had been searching for Emily nonstop. "We need to call the police," I told her gently. Emily's reaction was immediate and terrifying. She grabbed my arm with both hands, her eyes wide with panic. No, police? The men said if I called the police, they would hurt my daddy." "Sweetheart, the police are the good guys. They help find lost children." "No," she said again, tears starting to flow. "Please do not call them. Please." I held her as she cried, feeling her tiny body shake with fear. Whatever had happened to her, whatever those men had told her, she was genuinely terrified of involving the authorities. The storm raged on outside. Through the store windows, I could see trees bending nearly horizontal in the wind. Power lines sparked and swayed dangerously. This was no ordinary storm. "Okay," I said finally. "No police tonight, but Emily, we have to find your daddy somehow." She nodded, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "He is probably looking for me. I am sure he is." We spent the next 4 hours in that convenience store. The clerk, whose name was Eddie, turned out to be kind-hearted beneath his gruff exterior. When he realized what was happening, he stopped charging me for the hot chocolate from the machine and let us stay as long as we needed. "Storm like this, nobody should be out there," he said. "You can wait here until it passes." Around midnight, the worst of the weather finally moved through. The rain diminished to a steady drizzle, and the wind died down enough that we could hear ourselves think. "We should try to find a safe place for you to sleep," I told Emily. "Tomorrow, we will figure out how to find your daddy." But where could we go? I could not bring her to the shelter. They had strict policies about children, and besides, it was not safe for a little girl there. Hotels were out of the question with my limited funds. "I know a place," Emily said quietly. "There is a park not far from here. It has a gazebo with a roof." The idea of spending the night in a park with a child made my stomach turn. But what choice did we have? As we prepared to leave the store, Eddie called out to us. "Hey, wait!" He walked over with a plastic bag. "Take these," he said, handing me the bag. Inside were granola bars, bottled water, and a small blanket from the store's camping section. "I cannot pay for these," I told him. "Did not ask you to," he replied. "Kid needs to eat." Outside, the air was clean and cool after the storm. Debris littered the streets, tree branches scattered garbage, broken glass. But the worst had passed. Emily led me through several blocks to a small neighborhood park. The gazebo she had mentioned was old but sturdy, with a solid roof and partial walls that would provide some protection from the wind. I spread out the blanket and we huddled together. Emily curled up against my side like a small cat seeking warmth. "Helen," she said softly in the darkness. "Yes, sweetheart. Are you my guardian angel?" The question caught me off guard. Here I was, a homeless woman with $13 to my name, and this precious child saw me as her protector. "I am just someone who cares about you," I said. "Daddy always said that guardian angels come when you need them most." I held her tighter, this beautiful, brave little girl who had been through so much. "Well then, maybe I am." As Emily's breathing evened out in sleep, I stared up at the gazebo ceiling and wondered what tomorrow would bring. I had no idea that in less than 72 hours, 17 black cars would pull up outside the shelter, and my life would change in ways I could never have imagined. 3 days passed in a blur of careful survival and growing attachment. Emily and I had established a routine of sorts. Mornings at the convenience store where Eddie let us use the bathroom and buy minimal supplies, afternoons in the park when weather permitted, and nights back at the gazebo or sometimes in the 24-hour laundromat when it got too cold. I was amazed by Emily's resilience. Despite everything she had been through, she maintained a sunny disposition most of the time. She told me stories about her life fragments that painted a picture of wealth and privilege I could barely imagine. A house with 12 bedrooms, a swimming pool shaped like a butterfly horses in a stable behind the main residence. "Daddy travels a lot for work," she explained as we shared a bag of crackers on our 3rd morning together. "Sometimes I do not see him for weeks, but when he comes home, we have tea parties in the garden." "What kind of work does your daddy do?" I asked, though I was not sure she would understand the answer even if she knew it. "He makes things happen," Emily said. Seriously important things. That is why the bad men wanted to take me to make him do what they wanted. The more she talked, the more convinced I became that her father was someone significant, wealthy enough to be a kidnapping target, important enough that professional criminals would risk taking his child. But if that was true, why had I not seen any news coverage? Why were there not search parties, police alerts, FBI involvement? On Tuesday afternoon, as we sat in the park watching pigeons fight over breadcrumbs I had bought with my dwindling funds, Emily suddenly grabbed my arm. "Helen," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "That car, it has been there before." I followed her gaze to a black sedan parked across the street. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside, and it had been there for about 20 minutes. "Are you sure?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Emily nodded, pressing closer to me. "Yesterday, when we were at the store, and the day before near the gazebo." My heart rate spiked. If someone was watching us, if the kidnappers had found Emily again, we were in serious danger. A 64-year-old woman and a small child were no match for professional criminals. "We are going to walk away very calmly," I told her quietly. "Just like we are going somewhere normal. Do not look back at the car." We gathered our few belongings and started walking deeper into the park toward the tree line where we could disappear if necessary. Behind us, I heard a car door slam. "They are following us," Emily whimpered. I picked up our pace, my mind racing. There was a shopping center about 6 blocks away. Lots of people and security cameras if we could make it there. "Excuse me." The voice behind us was male, authoritative. I did not turn around. "Ma'am, please stop." I grabbed Emily's hand and started running. She kept up surprisingly well for such a small child, but I could hear footsteps gaining on us. "We are not going to hurt you," someone called. Right. That was what they all said. We made it maybe 2 blocks before a second black car appeared at the intersection ahead of us. Then a third came from our left. We were surrounded. Men in dark suits emerged from the vehicles. Not the rough criminals I had expected, but professionals in expensive clothes with earpieces and the kind of bearing that suggested military or law enforcement backgrounds. I pulled Emily behind me, my heart hammering. "Stay back," I shouted. "I have called the police." It was a lie, but maybe they would believe it. One of the men, older than the others, with graying hair and kind eyes, stepped forward with his hands visible. "Mrs. Ma'am, my name is Agent Collins. We are not here to harm anyone. We are looking for Emily Lawson." Emily's grip on my hand tightened. "Is that your last name, sweetheart?" I asked quietly. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. But they might be lying. The bad men could be pretending. Agent Collins seemed to understand her fear. "Emily, honey, do you remember the song your daddy used to sing to you when you could not sleep? The one about the mockingbird?" Emily's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" "Because your daddy told me. He has been looking for you for 6 days, sweetheart. He is very worried. Daddy is really looking for me." "He is, and he is right here." Agent Collins spoke into his earpiece, and moments later, the most expensive car I had ever seen pulled up to the curb. Not just expensive, extraordinary. A Rolls-Royce that probably cost more than I had made in 5 years. The man who stepped out took my breath away. He was tall, maybe 6'3", with dark hair silvered at the temples, and the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. His suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and everything about him screamed power and wealth. But when he saw Emily, all of that fell away. "Emily. Daddy." She broke away from me and ran to him, launching herself into his arms. He caught her and held her like she was the most precious thing in the world, his face buried in her hair as his shoulders shook with emotion. "Thank God," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Thank God you are safe." I stood there watching this reunion, suddenly acutely aware of my own appearance. My hair was unwashed. My clothes were the same ones I had been wearing for 3 days, and I probably smelled like the laundromat where we had spent last night. After several minutes, the man Emily's father sat her down, but kept one hand on her shoulder as he looked at me. "You are the woman who has been taking care of my daughter." It was not a question. His eyes were studying me intently, and I had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see straight through to my soul. Yes, I found her during the storm. She was scared and alone. He stepped closer, and I instinctively took a step back, not from fear, but from the overwhelming intensity of his presence. Agent Collins told me what his team observed. "You have been protecting her for 3 days, feeding her, keeping her safe, staying with her." I nodded, not sure what else to say. "What is your name, Helen?" "Helen Carter." "Helen Carter." He repeated it like he was memorizing it. "My name is Daniel Lawson." The name still did not mean anything to me, but clearly it should have. Agent Collins and the other men were watching our interaction with the kind of attention reserved for significant moments. "Emily told me what you did for her," Daniel continued. "How you spent your last money to buy her dry clothes and food. How you protected her from the people she was afraid of. Any decent person would have done the same thing." Something shifted in his expression. "No, Helen. Most people would have called the authorities immediately and gone on with their lives. You made yourself responsible for a stranger's child." Emily tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, Helen does not have a home. She has been sleeping outside with me." Daniel's attention sharpened. "You are homeless." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "It is temporary. I'm getting back on my feet." "Why?" The question was direct, almost blunt. I was not sure how to answer without explaining my entire story. "Life circumstances," I said, finally. Daniel studied me for another long moment, then spoke to Agent Collins. "I want a full background check within 2 hours. Everything. Financial history, criminal record, medical records, employment history, family situation, everything." "Sir, that is not really necessary. It is very necessary." Daniel's tone brooked no argument. "This woman has been caring for my daughter for 3 days. I need to know who she is." I felt a flash of indignation. "I do not need your investigation. I am not asking for anything from you." "Maybe not," Daniel said, "but I am asking something from you, what I would like you to come with us. Emily does not want to let you out of her sight, and frankly, neither do I, at least until I can properly thank you for what you have done." Emily immediately grabbed my hand. "Please. Helen, do not leave me. Sweetheart, you are safe now. You are with your daddy, but I want you to come too. Please." I looked between Emily's pleading face and her father's unreadable expression. "I do not think that is appropriate. You have your daughter back. That is what matters. Get in the car, Helen." It was not a request. Daniel Lawson might have been grateful, but he was clearly a man accustomed to being obeyed. "I would rather not." "I am afraid I have to insist." Agent Collins stepped closer. "Ma'am, Mr. Lawson just wants to ensure your safety. You have been exposed to a dangerous situation by helping Emily. Until we are certain the threat has been neutralized, you could be at risk." That possibility had not occurred to me. If the kidnappers had been watching us, if they had seen me with Emily, I might indeed be in danger. "For how long?" 24 hours, Daniel said. "Give me 24 hours to debrief Emily, deal with the security situation, and figure out how to properly thank you. Then, if you want to leave, you are free to go." Emily was still holding my hand, looking up at me with those enormous brown eyes. "Please, Helen, I am scared without you. And that decided it. The interior of the Rolls-Royce was like nothing I had ever experienced. Leather seats softer than most beds, climate control that made the air feel like a gentle spring breeze, and enough space that Emily and I could sit comfortably while Daniel sat across from us. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere safe," Daniel replied, but he was looking at Emily, not me. "Baby girl, I need you to tell me everything that happened, starting with the day you disappeared." Emily launched into her story, and as she talked, I began to understand the scope of what had occurred. She had been taken from her private school by two men claiming to be friends of her father. They had held her in an abandoned warehouse for 2 days, waiting for Daniel to comply with some demand they had made. "What did they want from you?" I asked Daniel. His jaw tightened. "Access to certain government contracts, information that could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars to the right people. And you refused? I could not give them what they wanted, even if I had wanted to. The information does not exist in the way they thought it did, so they just kept Emily. They were waiting for me to change my mind. What they did not count on was Emily being resourceful enough to escape." I looked at the little girl with new respect. She had not only escaped professional kidnappers, but had survived on the streets for nearly a week. "How did you get away, sweetheart?" "They left me alone for a few minutes," Emily said. "The rope was not tied very tight, and there was a loose board in the wall. I wiggled through and ran." Daniel closed his eyes briefly, and I could see the pain on his face as he imagined his daughter in that situation. The car turned through massive iron gates, and I got my first glimpse of the Lawson estate. Calling it a house would have been like calling the ocean a pond. The mansion sprawled across what had to be at least 20 acres with manicured gardens, fountains, and outbuildings that were larger than most people's homes. The main residence looked like something from a European fairy tale, all stone towers and graceful arches. "This is where you live?" I asked Emily. She nodded like it was perfectly normal. "Want to see my room? It has a balcony that looks out over the stables." As we pulled up to the front entrance, staff members emerged to greet us. Not just a butler or housekeeper, but what appeared to be a small army of people whose job was apparently to take care of the Lawson family. Daniel helped Emily out of the car, then offered me his hand. I hesitated before taking it, acutely aware of the contrast between his manicured fingers and my own worn hands. "Mrs. Carter," he said as we walked toward the entrance. "Before we go inside, I need you to understand something. What happened to Emily? What you did for her? It changes things. I do not know exactly how yet, but it does." I was not sure what he meant, but something in his tone made me think my 4 hours at the Lawson estate were going to be far more complicated than I had anticipated. I had never imagined that taking a shower could feel like a religious experience. The guest suite Daniel had assigned me was larger than the entire apartment I had shared with Thomas. The bathroom alone was bigger than most bedrooms, with marble surfaces, gold fixtures, and a shower that had more buttons and settings than a spacecraft control panel. As hot water cascaded over me from what felt like a dozen different angles, I tried to process everything that had happened in the last 6 hours. After arriving at the estate, Daniel had disappeared into what I assumed was a series of important phone calls while Emily gave me a tour of her wing of the house. Her bedroom was indeed enormous, with a canopy bed, a reading nook, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and French doors that opened onto a balcony overlooking the stables she had mentioned. "This is where I have tea parties when Daddy is home," she explained, showing me a small table set with delicate china cups. "Would you like to have one with me later? I would love that, sweetheart." Emily's enthusiasm was infectious, but I could not shake the feeling that I did not belong in this world of marble floors and crystal chandeliers. I was a temporary guest, someone who had helped during a crisis but would soon return to reality. The reality of the homeless shelter and my 7 remaining dollars. A soft knock on the bathroom door interrupted my thoughts. "Mrs. Carter." It was a woman's voice, unfamiliar but kind. I am Martha, the house manager. I have left some clothes for you on the bed. They should fit reasonably well. Thank you, I called back, though I had not asked for clothes. When I emerged from the shower, I found an outfit laid out that probably cost more than I had made in a month at my old job. A soft cashmere sweater and pale blue well-tailored slacks and undergarments that still had price tags attached. Even the shoes were their comfortable flats in exactly my size. How had they known my measurements? The answer came as I was getting dressed. Through the suite's windows, I could see a team of people working in the gardens below. Not gardeners, but men in suits who moved with the same precision as Agent Collins and his team. Daniel had not just brought me here for Emily's comfort. He really had been concerned about my safety, and that suggested resources far beyond what I had initially realized. A gentle knock on the main door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called. Martha entered with a warm smile. She was perhaps 50 years old with graying brown hair and the kind of efficient manner that suggested she had been managing wealthy households for decades. "How are you feeling, dear?" she asked, looking me over approvingly. "Much better, I imagine. The clothes are beautiful, but I cannot accept them. I do not have any way to pay you back." Martha's smile did not waver. "They are a gift from Mr. Lawson. He specifically requested that you have everything you might need during your stay." "I am only staying 24 hours. "Of course," Martha agreed, though something in her tone suggested she was not entirely convinced. "Mr. Lawson would like to see you in his study when you are ready. Emily is having her dinner and then a bath. She has had quite an ordeal." The next 3 days passed in a strange blur of comfort and questioning. Daniel's security and legal teams quietly verified every detail of my story while I stayed mostly in the guest suite and the gardens with Emily. They spoke to Dr. Lopez, confirmed the sale of my shop and house-checked court records about my divorce, and even contacted the shelter on Oakwood Avenue. By the time Daniel called me to his study again, there were no more unknowns left about who I was or how I had ended up on the street. The study was exactly what I would have expected from a man like Daniel Lawson. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and furniture that looked like it had been crafted by master artisans. Daniel himself sat behind a massive desk, still wearing his expensive suit, but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. He looked up when I entered, and something flickered in his expression. "You look rested." "I feel human again," I admitted. "Thank you for the clothes, but I cannot accept them. We will discuss that later." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Please sit. We need to talk." I settled into the chair, which was more comfortable than it looked. "About what?" "About you." Daniel leaned back, studying me with those intense eyes. "I had my people run the background check I mentioned. I know about the divorce, the medical bills, your husband's betrayal. I know about your business, what you sacrificed, and how you ended up at the shelter." Heat flooded my cheeks. The idea of strangers investigating my personal life, learning about my failures and humiliations, made me feel exposed and vulnerable. "You had no right." "I had every right," Daniel interrupted smoothly. "A stranger spent 3 days caring for my daughter in circumstances that could have been dangerous for both of them. I needed to know who you are." "And what did you conclude?" "That you are exactly who you appeared to be. A woman who has been dealt a series of terrible hands, but who still chose to help a frightened child with the last money she had." I did not know what to say to that. Daniel leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. "Helen, I want to make you an offer." "What kind of offer?" "I need someone to help with Emily. Someone she trusts. Someone who understands what she has been through." He paused. "I travel frequently for business, sometimes for weeks at a time. Emily has nannies and tutors, but what she does not have is someone who genuinely cares about her well-being. She has you when I am here, Yes, but I am not here enough. There was pain in his voice, the guilt of a father who knew his work kept him away from his daughter. What happened this week has made me realize that Emily needs more stability in her life, more consistency. What exactly are you suggesting? I am offering you a position as Emily's companion, not a nanny. She is too old for that, but someone who would be responsible for her emotional well-being when I am traveling. Someone who would live here, be part of her daily life. I stared at him. You want me to move in here? The position comes with a salary of $220,000 per year, plus complete benefits, housing, meals, and a generous expense account for anything Emily might need. $220,000. I tried to process that number. It was more money than I had ever dreamed of making. Plus, Daniel continued, there would be a signing bonus of $70,000 to help you get back on your feet. This is insane, I said quietly. You do not know me. You do not know if I am qualified to take care of a child. I know you spent 3 days protecting her when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose. I know you gave her your last 20 when you were homeless yourself. I know she feels safe with you in a way she has not with anyone since her mother died. Her mother died. Daniel's expression grew distant. Cancer when Emily was 5. It has just been the two of us ever since, and I have not done nearly as good a job as I should have. I understood then this was not just about hiring help. This was about a father who knew he was failing his daughter and had found someone who could fill a void he could not fill himself. Why me? I asked. You could hire anyone, someone with credentials, experience with wealthy families. Emily does not trust easily, Daniel said. She has been through too much, but she trusts you. That is worth more than any credentials. I thought about Emily's small hand in mine during the storm. The way she had curled up against me in the gazebo, how she had called me her guardian angel. I need time to think about this. Of course, take all the time you need. But before I could respond, Martha appeared in the doorway. I am sorry to interrupt, Mr. Lawson, but there is a situation at the front gate. Daniel frowned. What kind of situation? A man claiming to be Mrs. Carter's husband. He is quite insistent about seeing her. My stomach dropped. Thomas. You do not have to see him, Daniel said immediately. Security can remove him from the property. But I was already standing. No, I will talk to him. I need to know what he wants. Daniel's expression hardened. Then I am coming with you. The front gate was a 1/4 mile from the main house, but we could hear Thomas's voice even from that distance. He was shouting at the security guard, demanding to be let in, threatening to call the police. As our car approached, I could see him clearly for the first time since the divorce. He looked older, thinner, and there was something desperate about his posture that I had never seen before. The moment he saw me, his whole demeanor changed. Helen. He rushed toward the car as I got out. Thank God I found you. What are you doing here, Thomas? How did you even know where I was? It does not matter. I have been looking everywhere for you. He reached for my hands, but I stepped back. Helen, I have made a terrible mistake. The worst mistake of my life. What are you talking about, Lily? The divorce, all of it. I was crazy, Helen. The cancer, the treatment, it affected my judgment. I was not thinking clearly. I became aware of Daniel standing slightly behind me and of the security personnel positioned discreetly around us. Whatever was about to happen, it was going to have an audience. You seemed pretty clear when you asked for a divorce, I said. I was scared. Thomas continued, his voice taking on a pleading tone I had never heard before. Scared of dying, scared of being a burden. I thought if I pushed you away, it would be easier for everyone. By having an affair, Thomas had the grace to look ashamed. That was a mistake. A huge mistake. Lily, she took advantage of me when I was vulnerable. Took advantage. I could not help but laugh bitterly. Thomas, you left me homeless. You threw away 40 years of marriage for a woman young enough to be your daughter. I know, he said desperately, and I have regretted it every single day since Lily left me, Helen. 2 weeks after the divorce was final, she took half of everything I had and moved to Arizona with another man. So that was it. Thomas was not here because he missed me, or because he had realized what he had lost. He was here because his young girlfriend had taken him for everything he was worth. I am sorry that happened to you, I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. But it does not change anything between us. It changes everything. Thomas stepped closer, ignoring Daniel's presence entirely. We can start over, Helen. We can get remarried. Go back to the way things were. The way things were, I repeated. Thomas, I sold my business to save your life. I sold our house. I gave up everything for you. And the moment you got better, you threw me away like garbage. I was wrong. You were selfish, I interrupted, and cruel, and you left me with nothing. But look at you now. Thomas gestured at the mansion behind us. You have obviously landed on your feet, found yourself a rich man to take care of you. The implication in his words, the casual assumption that I was some kind of gold digger, hit me like a physical blow. You do not know anything about my situation, I said quietly. I know you are not living in a shelter anymore. Thomas's tone was becoming more aggressive. I know you are wearing clothes that cost more than most people make in a month. I know you have obviously moved on pretty quickly for a woman who claimed to love me. Claimed to love you. The words came out sharper than I intended. I gave you my entire life, Thomas. I sacrificed my dreams, my security, my future for you, and you repaid me by abandoning me the moment it was convenient. People make mistakes, Helen. Some mistakes cannot be forgiven. Daniel stepped forward, then his presence suddenly much more prominent. I think this conversation is over. Thomas seemed to notice him for the first time. And who exactly are you? Someone who knows how to treat a good woman when he finds one? Daniel replied calmly. Thomas's face flushed red. Helen, you cannot seriously be choosing this stranger over your husband. Ex-husband, I corrected, and I am not choosing anyone. I am choosing myself for the first time in 40 years. You will regret this, Thomas said, his voice turning ugly. You are 64 years old, Helen. How long do you think this is going to last? What happens when he gets tired of you? That is enough. Daniel said, his voice carrying an authority that made even Thomas step back. But the damage was done. Thomas's words had hit their target, awakening every insecurity I had been trying to suppress. I was 64. I was a homeless woman who had been rescued by a wealthy man 30 years younger than me. Maybe Thomas was right. Maybe this was just temporary charity. I think you should leave now, I told Thomas quietly. He studied my face for a long moment, perhaps hoping to see some sign that his words had worked. When he did not find what he was looking for, his expression hardened. Fine, but do not come crawling back to me when this fantasy ends, Helen. I will not be there. He walked back to his car, a rusted Honda that looked even more pathetic next to the Rolls-Royce and the security vehicles. As his taillights disappeared down the drive, I stood there, feeling like I had been hollowed out inside. Are you all right? Daniel asked gently. I nodded, though I was not sure I was. I should probably go back to the shelter tomorrow. This was all a mistake. Was it? You heard what he said. I am 64 years old. Emily needs someone young, energetic, someone who can keep up with her. Emily needs someone who cares about her, Daniel said. Age has nothing to do with that. But as we drove back to the house, I could not shake Thomas's words. What happens when he gets tired of you? It was a question I did not have an answer for, and one that would keep me awake most of the night. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Thomas's voice. What happens when he gets tired of you? By dawn, I had made my decision. I would thank Daniel for his kindness, say goodbye to Emily, and return to the shelter where I belonged. But Emily had other plans. You cannot leave, she announced when I joined her for breakfast in the sunny morning room overlooking the gardens. We have not had our tea party yet. Sweetheart, I think it is time for me to go. Your daddy is here now. You are safe. Emily's face crumpled. But I do not want you to go. You are my guardian angel. Before I could respond, Daniel appeared in the doorway. He looked like he had not slept much, either his hair slightly disheveled, and his usually perfect appearance more relaxed. Good morning, he said, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my stomach flutter. I hope you slept well. I did. Thank you. The lie came easily. I was just telling Emily that I should be going today. Daddy, tell her she cannot leave. Emily pleaded, tears starting to form in her eyes. Daniel sat down at the table, accepting the cup of coffee Martha had poured for him. Actually, Helen, there is something we need to discuss before you make any decisions. What do you mean I had a long conversation with Agent Collins last night? The investigation into Emily's kidnapping has revealed some disturbing information. My blood went cold. What kind of information? The men who took Emily were not just after money or business secrets. They were specifically targeting my family because of certain government contracts my company holds, contracts that involve national security. Emily had stopped crying and was listening with wide eyes. This was clearly news to her, too. What does that have to do with me? I asked. You have been seen with Emily. There are photographs of you together during those 3 days taken by the kidnappers' associates before they were arrested. As far as anyone watching knows, you are important to my family now. The implications hit me like a truck. You are saying I am in danger. I am saying that leaving now, going back to the shelter, or trying to resume your old life would be extremely dangerous. These people do not forgive, and they do not forget. I felt the walls closing in around me. So what are you suggesting, that I hide here forever? I am suggesting that the job offer I made yesterday was not just a kindness. It was also the safest option for everyone involved. Emily reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Please stay, Helen. I will be really good. I promise. We can have tea parties every day. I looked at this beautiful child who had already lost her mother and had nearly been lost herself, and felt my resolve wavering. I need some time to think, I said finally. Daniel nodded. Of course. But while you are thinking, there is something else you should know. Before he could continue, Martha appeared in the doorway with an expression I had not seen before. Barely controlled anger. Sir, I am sorry to interrupt, but there is another situation at the gate. Daniel's jaw tightened. The same man as yesterday? No, sir. This time it is a younger man claiming to be Mrs. Carter's son. He is with the older gentleman from yesterday, and they are both quite agitated. My heart sank. Michael. Of course, Thomas would bring Michael. I do not have to see them, I said quickly. Actually, you do. Daniel's voice was calm but firm. If we do not deal with this now, they will keep coming back. Better to handle it once and for all. 20 minutes later, I found myself facing both Thomas and Michael at the front gate. My son looked uncomfortable but determined, while Thomas appeared smugly confident, as if he had brought reinforcements for a battle he was sure to win. Mom, Michael said the moment he saw me. Dad told me what happened yesterday, what you said to him. I told him the truth, I replied evenly. He made a mistake, Michael continued. People make mistakes, but that does not mean you abandon your family. The irony of those words coming from him, the son who had taken his father's side during the divorce without question, was almost laughable. Where were you when I needed my family? Michael, I asked quietly. When I was living in a shelter, where were you then? Michael had the grace to look ashamed. I did not know it was that bad. You did not want to know. Thomas stepped forward, clearly impatient with the emotional scene. Helen, let us cut through all this drama. I have spoken with a lawyer. Since our divorce is not final yet, you are still legally my wife, which means you cannot enter into any financial agreements without my consent. I stared at him in disbelief. What are you talking about? Our divorce was finalized months ago. Actually, it was not. Thomas's smile was triumphant. There was a problem with the paperwork, a filing error. Technically, we are still married, which gives me certain rights regarding your decisions. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. That is not possible. Check with your lawyer if you want, but I am telling you the truth. Thomas's voice became wheedling, manipulative. Look, Helen, I am trying to save our marriage here. This whole situation is just you acting out because you are hurt. I understand that, but it is time to come home. Home to what I asked. The apartment you share with Lily? Lily's gone, Michael interjected. Dad is alone. Mom, he needs you. He needs my money, I corrected, just like before. That was when Daniel stepped forward. I had not even heard him approach, but suddenly he was there, and his presence changed everything. Gentlemen, he said in a voice that could have frozen fire. I think there has been a misunderstanding. Thomas looked him up and down dismissively. And you are Daniel Lawson, and I believe you are trespassing on my property. We are here to get my wife, Thomas said, puffing up his chest in a pathetic display of dominance. Your wife? Daniel's eyebrow rose slightly. That is interesting, because according to the background check my legal team ran yesterday, your divorce from Mrs. Carter was finalized 4 months ago. The color drained from Thomas's face. That is, there was an error. There was no error. Daniel's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. What there was, apparently, was an attempt to manipulate Mrs. Carter with false information. Michael looked confused. Dad, you said your father lied. Daniel said simply, just as he has been lying about his reasons for wanting his ex-wife back. You do not know anything about our situation, Thomas sputtered. Do I not? Daniel pulled out his phone and scrolled to something. Let us see. Thomas Carter, age 68, recently divorced, lost approximately $90,000 to a fraudulent investment scheme promoted by his girlfriend, Lily Harper. Currently 3 months behind on rent for his apartment, credit cards, maxed out bank accounts, overdrawn. With each word, Thomas seemed to shrink a little more. So, you see? Daniel continued. I know exactly what this is about. This is not a man who wants his wife back. This is a man who needs someone to bail him out of his financial problems. Michael was staring at his father with growing horror. Dad, is this true? Thomas's face was red with humiliation and rage. Helen, you cannot seriously believe I can believe it, because it is exactly what you did during your cancer treatment, I said quietly. You used me then, just like you are trying to use me now. That is not, I was sick, Helen. I was not thinking clearly. And what is your excuse now? Thomas had no answer for that. Daniel stepped closer, and I could see why Agent Collins and his team followed his orders without question. When Daniel Lawson wanted to be intimidating, he was terrifying. Here is what is going to happen, Daniel said, his voice deadly quiet. You are going to leave this property immediately. You are not going to contact Mrs. Carter again. You are not going to harass her, threaten her, or attempt to manipulate her. If you do, you will discover exactly how much influence a man with my resources can have over someone's life. You cannot threaten me, Thomas said, but his voice was shaking. I am not threatening you. I am making you a promise. Daniel paused, letting that sink in. Mrs. Carter is under my protection now. That means she is untouchable. Do you understand? Thomas understood. Whatever fight had been in him deflated completely, but Michael was not finished. Mom, please do not let this man turn you against your own family. I looked at my son. This man I had raised, loved, sacrificed for, and felt a profound sadness settle over me. Michael, where were you when I was homeless? I did not know. You knew exactly where I was. Your father told you. You chose not to care. That is not fair. Is it not? I stepped closer to him. When I called you after the divorce, what did you say? You said I should accept that your father had the right to be happy. You called me dramatic for objecting to his affair. You took his side without even hearing mine. Michael's face flushed. He is my father, and I am your mother. But that did not seem to matter when it was inconvenient for you. So that is it. Michael's voice was rising. You are choosing this stranger over your own family. I am choosing myself, I said firmly. For the first time in my life, I am choosing what is best for me, instead of sacrificing everything for people who do not appreciate it. You will regret this, Thomas said bitterly. Both of you will regret this. Daniel's expression did not change. Are you threatening my family, Mr. Carter? The word family hit me like a lightning bolt. Daniel had just referred to me as family. Because if you are, Daniel continued, I should mention that every word of this conversation is being recorded. Threatening the family of someone with government security clearance is a federal crime. That was the final blow. Thomas and Michael left without another word, their heads down, and their dignity in tatters. As their car disappeared down the drive, I felt like I had just witnessed the end of a chapter of my life. Are you all right? Daniel asked gently. I nodded, though I was not entirely sure I was. Did you mean it? What you said about family. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Emily lost her mother when she was 5. I have been trying to be both parents to her, but I have failed in a lot of ways. She needs stability, love someone who puts her first. He turned to look at me directly. But it is more than that, Helen. In the 3 days you spent protecting her, Emily smiled more than she had in months. She laughed. She felt safe. You gave her something I had not been able to give her. What is that? A mother's love. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I cannot replace her real mother, I said softly. I am not asking you to replace anyone. I am asking you to be yourself. To be the woman who spent her last twin on a frightened child. To be the person who made Emily feel safe when her whole world was falling apart. We stood there in the afternoon sunlight, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I allowed myself to imagine what it might be like to wake up every morning in that beautiful guest suite, to have tea parties with Emily in her garden, to be part of a family that actually wanted me. The job offer still stands, Daniel said quietly. $220,000 a year, plus benefits, plus the signing bonus. But more than that, Helen, you would be giving Emily something she has never really had. A stable, loving presence in her daily life. I thought about the shelter, about my 7 remaining dollars, about the loneliness that had become my constant companion. Then I thought about Emily's bright smile, her small hand in mine, the way she had called me her guardian angel. "Yes," I said before I could change my mind. "Yes, I will take the job." Daniel's smile was radiant. Emily's going to be over the moon, but as we walked back toward the house, I could not shake the feeling that this decision would change more than just my living situation. It would change everything in ways I could not even begin to imagine. 2 years later, I stood in the same garden where Emily and I had shared our first tea party, watching her chase butterflies among the roses. At 10 years old, she had grown taller and more confident, but she still insisted on our daily tea time together. The transformation in both our lives had been remarkable, but not in ways I could have predicted. Daniel had been true to his word about everything. The salary, the benefits, the signing bonus of $70,000. It had all materialized exactly as promised. But more importantly, he had kept his word about treating me as family. Helen Emily called from across the garden. "Come see the blue butterfly is back." I made my way over to where she was crouched beside the lavender bushes, watching a magnificent blue morpho butterfly rest on the purple flowers. "She only comes here when she knows it is safe," Emily said softly. "Just like you did." The observation was so unexpectedly wise that it took my breath away. In 2 years, Emily had grown from a traumatized little girl into a thoughtful, compassionate child who saw the world with remarkable clarity. "You know what, sweetheart?" I said, settling beside her on the garden bench. "I think you are right. Our morning routine had become sacred to both of us. Breakfast together, then garden time, followed by her lessons with her tutors, while I managed the increasingly complex social calendar that came with being part of the Lawson household. Because that was what I had become. Not just Emily's companion, but an integral part of their family. The change had been gradual. First, Daniel had started asking my opinion about Emily's education, her activities, her emotional needs. Then, he had begun including me in decisions about the household, the staff, even some aspects of his business travel. "What do you think about the Tokyo trip?" he would ask over dinner. 2 weeks is a long time to be away from Emily. "She is doing much better with separation anxiety," I would respond. "But maybe we could arrange video calls at specific times each day." Somewhere along the way, we had become natural. 6 months after I had moved in, Daniel had surprised me with a new title and a significant raise. Head of Family Operations, he had called it, with a salary of $330,000 per year. "I do not understand," I had said when he explained the new position. "I am already doing everything I was hired to do." "You are doing far more than that," he had replied. "You are managing staff schedules, coordinating Emily's activities, handling social obligations, and making this house feel like a home instead of just a residence. That is worth recognizing." But the real recognition had come in smaller moments. The first time Emily had called me Helen Mom in front of her friends, the night she had had a nightmare, and had run to my room instead of her father's, the afternoon when Daniel had introduced me to a business associate as Emily's second mother and the person who keeps this family functioning. Each moment had built upon the others until I had realized something profound. I was not just employed by the Lawsons. I belonged to them and they belonged to me. Time for lessons. I reminded Emily as we made our way back toward the house. "Do I have to? Can we not just play in the garden all day? Education is important, young lady. Besides, do you not have that writing competition next month?" Emily's face lit up. "Oh, right. I need to practice my jumping." As we entered through the French doors that led to the morning room, I nearly collided with Martha, who was carrying a silver tray with what appeared to be legal documents. "Oh, Mrs. Carter, perfect timing. These just arrived for you." My heart skipped. Legal documents were never good news. What are they? I am not sure, but the messenger said they were urgent. I took the envelope with trembling hands, my mind immediately jumping to worst-case scenarios. Had someone challenged Daniel's authority to employ me? Was there some legal issue with my background check? But as I read the documents, my confusion only deepened. "What is it?" Emily asked, sensing my distress. I am not sure I understand this," I said, reading through the legal language again. That was when Daniel appeared, still wearing his suit from his morning meetings, but with a smile that suggested he knew exactly what I was holding. He said, casually. "Those arrived. Daniel, what is this?" "It is an adult adoption petition," he said gently. "An adoption," I repeated stupidly. "Yes," he continued. "Legally, it means I would adopt you as part of our family so that Emily becomes your granddaughter on paper as well as in her heart." The words did not compute. "I do not understand." Emily bounced in her chair. "We want to make it official. You are already my Helen mom, but Daddy says we can make it legal so you will really be part of our family forever." I stared at the papers, then at Daniel, then at Emily. This is not how adoption works. Children do not adopt adults." "Actually, they can," Daniel said gently. "It is called adult adoption, and it is more common than you might think. Emily would become your legal granddaughter, and you would become her legal grandmother. It does not change anything about our daily lives, but it makes the relationships official." But why? Daniel leaned forward, his expression intensely serious. "Because in 2 years, you have become the most important person in Emily's life. Because when I travel now, I do not worry about her, because I know you are here. Because this house is not the same without you." And Emily added with the matter-of-fact tone only children can manage. "Because we love you, and we want you to be stuck with us forever. Stuck with them." As if being part of this extraordinary family could ever be a burden. "There is more," Daniel continued. He pulled out another set of documents. "If you agree to the adoption, I would also like to update my will to include you as Emily's guardian. Not just companion or caregiver, but her legal guardian if anything happens to me." The weight of what he was offering hit me like a physical blow. Legal guardianship meant that if something happened to Daniel, Emily would be mine to raise. It meant permanent security, permanent belonging, permanent family. "I do not know what to say," I whispered. "Say yes," Emily exclaimed. "Please, Helen, I want you to be my real grandma." I looked at this beautiful child who had already lost one mother and had chosen me to fill that void. I thought about the scared little girl I had found behind a dumpster 2 years ago, and the confident, loving child she had become. "Yes," I said, my voice breaking. "Yes, absolutely yes." Emily launched herself into my arms with a squeal of delight that could probably be heard 3 counties away. "There is one more thing," Daniel said as Emily finally settled down. "A celebration is in order. I have planned a small party for this weekend. Nothing elaborate, just close friends and family." "Family," I repeated, tasting the word. "Family," he confirmed. The party that weekend was indeed small, but it felt enormous to me. Daniel had invited Agent Collins and his team, who had become something like extended family over the past 2 years. Martha and the other staff members, who had become dear friends, Emily's writing instructor, her favorite teacher, and 3 of her closest school friends were all there. But the most meaningful moment came when we were gathered in the garden for the cake cutting. Emily stood on a chair to address our small group. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my new grandma," she announced with the confidence of a born public speaker. 2 years ago, Helen found me when I was lost and scared. But really, I think maybe I found her too. She needed a family as much as I did. As applause filled the garden, I felt tears streaming down my face. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and Emily was asleep, I found myself in the study with Daniel sharing a quiet drink and reflecting on the day. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not found Emily that night? He asked. I considered the question. I would probably still be at the shelter, or worse, and Emily would still be traumatized, still afraid to trust anyone. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in our own thoughts. Daniel, I said finally, why did you really do all this? The job, the adoption, the guardianship, why? He was quiet for so long. I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. Because in 40 years of marriage, no one ever loved you the way you deserved to be loved. Because you spent your entire life taking care of other people who took you for granted. Because when you had nothing, you still gave everything to protect my daughter. He looked directly at me then. Because Emily needs you, and I think maybe you need us too. I do need you. I admitted both of you more than I ever imagined possible. 3 months after the adoption was finalized, I received an unexpected visitor. Martha found me in the garden and announced that Michael was at the front gate, asking to see me. My first instinct was to refuse. I had not spoken to my son since that awful confrontation 2 years ago. But something in Martha's expression suggested this visit was different. He looks different, she said carefully. Humbler. I found Michael standing beside a modest sedan dressed in simple clothes that were a far cry from the expensive suits he used to favor. He had lost weight, and there were lines around his eyes that had not been there before. Hello, Mom, he said quietly when he saw me. Michael. We stood looking at each other for several awkward moments before he spoke again. I came to apologize. I know it is too little too late, but I needed to say it. I waited, not making this easy for him. I was wrong about everything. About Dad, about the divorce, about how I treated you. I was selfish and cruel, and I have regretted it every day since. What changed? I asked. Michael looked down at his hands. Dad came to me 6 months ago. He needed money, and I was the only family he had left. I gave him what I could, but it was never enough. He kept asking for more, making bigger and bigger demands. He looked up at me with eyes that held genuine remorse. I realized that is exactly what he had done to you. Used you until there was nothing left, then discarded you when you could not give any more. I tried to tell you that. I know. I should have listened. Michael's voice broke slightly. I should have protected you instead of abandoning you. I felt my anger beginning to soften, replaced by sadness for the relationship we had lost. Michael, I appreciate the apology. I really do, but I cannot just forget what happened. I understand. I do not expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see clearly now. What Dad did was unforgivable, and what I did was almost as bad. He reached into his car and pulled out a small wrapped package. This was supposed to be your birthday present 3 years ago. The one I never gave you because I was angry about the divorce. I unwrapped it to find a small silver frame containing a photo from my 50th birthday party. Michael was perhaps 25 in the picture, his arm around me, both of us laughing at something his then-girlfriend had said. I found it while cleaning out my apartment, he said. I am moving back to Seattle, starting over, but I wanted you to have this in case you ever want to remember when things were good between us. Looking at that photo, I remembered the son who used to call me every Sunday, who brought me flowers on Mother's Day, who had once told his friends I was the strongest woman he knew. I am glad you are starting over, I said sincerely. I hope you find happiness. I hope I find peace, Michael replied. I hope someday I can become the son you deserved. After he left, I stood in the garden for a long time holding that photo and thinking about forgiveness, redemption, and second chances. That evening, Emily found me there. You look sad, Helen. Grandma, she said, using the new title she had insisted on since the adoption. Not sad, sweetheart, just thoughtful. About what I showed her the photo. About how sometimes people make terrible mistakes, but they can change if they really want to. Emily studied the picture seriously. Is that your son, the one who was mean to you? Yes, but he apologized today. He said he was sorry for how he treated me. Do you forgive him? The question asked with such innocent directness made me think. I think I am learning to, I said finally. Emily nodded sagely. Daddy says forgiveness does not mean you have to trust someone again. It just means you stop letting their bad choices hurt you. Out of the mouths of babes. As we walked back to the house together, Emily's small hand in mine, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought me to this moment. 2 years ago, I had been a broken woman with nothing left to lose. I had spent my last $20 on a frightened child and thought I was making the final gesture of a failed life. But that gesture had led to this. A family that cherished me. A home where I was valued. A future full of love and purpose. Sometimes guardian angels, I realized, come to save themselves as much as the people they protect. And sometimes the very act of giving everything away is what finally brings you everything you never knew you needed. Standing in the doorway of the mansion that was now truly my home, watching Emily skip ahead to tell her father about our garden conversation, I felt something I had not experienced in decades. Complete and perfect peace. I was Helen Lawson now, grandmother to the most wonderful child in the world, and member of a family that had shown me what unconditional love really meant. At 66 years old, my real life had finally begun. Now, I am curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I am leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.